bringing me back to like when I was a kid, and you know, when you're a teenager, there's nowhere to go, right? There's nothing to do. You're just not allowed to do anything. So it's one reason life sucks so bad as a teenager. But one thing you can do as a teenager is you can go in the streets, hang out with friends, fuck around. I did a ton of that, and I loved it. And in some ways, the pandemic is just bringing me back to that. Too bad I don't have a skateboard with me. That was cool. All right, gang. You gotta ask me some questions. I'll tell you some cool shit though. One thing that is news that I haven't written anywhere yet or told anyone yet is I'm gonna be doing another course with Nina Power. Nina Power and I are going to teach a course on, wait for it, George Bataille, the one and only George Bataille. This was requested by many people to do after doing bass Deleuze, that I should do bass Bataille. And I've always been very interested in George Bataille, and I've read most of George Bataille. And I do have, I think, a pretty good read on George Bataille. And Nina Power has been teaching continental philosophy even longer than I was teaching anything as a professor. So she's super legit, Nina, and just super cool also. I like Nina so much. I think she's so cool and ingenious and like weird in the best way. She's like the real deal. She's a real intellectual in the deepest sense. And yeah, so we've been kind of discussing that for some time, but she finally agreed. We're totally committed. She's game. We're gonna do it. And so we're gonna hammer out the details, but you can expect some content coming out soon, some stuff on YouTube, my vlog or whatever. And we'll be talking about Bataille. We'll be developing our perspective on George Bataille, and we're going to try to write a course. We're going to design a course with videos and live group seminars that features the best currently available introduction to George Bataille. So it'll be accessible to pretty much anyone who wants to learn about Bataille, and it'll also be of interest to people who already, let's say, maybe know a lot about Bataille, but they want to think more about it, they want to talk more about it, and especially if people want to work on topics related to Bataille, like people want to write about it or make content about Bataille, the course that we're doing on Bataille is going to be pretty much, I think, the best currently available learning experience or social intellectual experience available anywhere related to Bataille. He's very complicated, very confusing and weird, and it's hard to learn about Bataille. So we're really excited to put this together, and I have just so much respect for Nina, and so I'm really delighted and excited to be teaching a course with her. And so this will be my second one after the one I did with Johannes, and also I learned so much about how to do it in my experience doing the first one with Johannes. And so yeah, I'm super pumped on this. I haven't shared this with anyone. I haven't written it anywhere yet. So let's see. Sex Stupid says, Justin, if you were a phrenology, what would you say about Nina? What does that mean? I don't know. Oh, hey, Ben. What's up, Ben? How are you, man? Dude, are you in Albuquerque, Ben? You should come to this park that I'm at around the corner from my house. Thoughts on amphetamine? I think in small doses, with responsible usage, it's good. It can be good. Not for everyone. I'm not a doctor, so don't take my advice. Let's see if I can get this sorted. Hang on. There we go. Ooh. All right, now we got some people in the house, finally. All right, what's up, Evie? How you doing? Oh, Ben, you're still in Ohio. That's all right. Here, let me put this over here. All right. There we go. All right, so what were you asking me? What do people want to know? What's up, Evie? What's up, Randy? Ooh, that's a great question. What is Kantbot's endgame? Fascinating. Well, I can't pretend to know Kantbot very well. I don't know him well at all. I've talked with him once on my podcast, once on his podcast. So I'm afraid it's an interesting question. I'm kind of curious what his endgame is. I'm curious what Confot's master plan is, but I do not know. Oh, here we go. So Travis Touchdown asks, do you think Bataille's probably misspelling has crypto reactionary ideas like Deleuze? Okay, great. So yeah, let's talk about this. So got a car coming by. Probably going to run over my phone. Yeah, that's a great question. So I'll take that up. If I write based Bataille, it's not going to be on the thesis that Bataille was reactionary in the way that Deleuze is reactionary. It's not going to be the same idea. But I'll tell you after I light up this cigar what the main idea of based Bataille will be. I'm no cigar aficionado, so I do smoke them every now and then. However, maybe just like 4 or 5 times a year, maybe. The main thing I like about tobacco is just the energy kick that it gives you. And cars keep coming by. I hope I don't get no one calls the cops or anything like that. I should probably go to a quieter street. All right, we got 45 people in the house finally. It's time to get to work, son. All right, let's do this. Someone's asking about based Bataille. Well, 2 things I'll say. First is that the course I'm doing with Nina Power on based Bataille will be obviously half her perspective, and she is in complete control of her half of the course. She can teach Bataille however she wants on whatever topic she's interested in. For my part, I can tell you what I want to focus on. To me, the main point of interest in Bataille, what most of his work essentially revolves around, that I think is most based or most interesting and important, is his what I would call anti-instrumentalism. It's pretty much an extraordinary critique of utilitarianism and what you might call instrumental rationality more generally. So, in my view, Bataille is actually this amazing, just never-ending cornucopia of ammunition for attacking kind of vulgar contemporary utilitarianism. Now, there's intelligent and sophisticated utilitarianism for sure. I have some friends in the effective altruism movement and in the rationalism movement, and super smart people, some of them for sure. But personally, I think utilitarianism is wrong, and I just always have, and I've thought about that for a very long time, and I've read a lot about different ways of thinking about that question. And in my view, Bataille is arguably, within continental philosophy, probably the most powerful set of resources for really attacking utilitarianism at its core. And someone asks, what does utilitarianism mean? Is that like J.S. Mill? Mill's a utilitarian, that's right. But it's not reducible to that. I mean, I would say utilitarianism is the conventional wisdom in contemporary modern Western societies around morality, pretty much. The vulgar cartoon version of utilitarianism is just, basically maximizing utility. So you want to increase the amount of positive feeling, utility, if you will, in the world, and you want to decrease the amount of suffering or negative utility in the world. And you can pretty much approach most ethical or moral questions as a question of what on net is the effect. and one should choose those actions which increase utility, net utility, to the greatest degree. There are many different variants, and I just gave you a totally stupid, easy, simple version of that because it's fucking YouTube, and most of you just want, you know, big ideas in a condensed and easy to consume way. So that's what I tried to give you. Many different complicated, fascinating, and often sophisticated versions of utilitarianism, which I'm not even going to get into. But following someone like Max Weber, the great modern sociologist, contemporary utilitarianism as a kind of cultural product is only the kind of most recent instantiation of a much kind of longer cultural trend in the nature of social rationality as we know it. Just our societies as a whole are more instrumentally rational than they used to be. Everything is rationalized, right? In the 21st century, much more so than it was in, let's say, the 19th century. Efficiencies have been increased in every possible juncture. Anything that's wasteful or slow or you know, anything anything that can be improved instrumentally has been improved, and people take it as kind of a universal given that that's a good thing. Okay, that's just basic utilitarianism, or that's the basic kind of culture of instrumental rationality. And Weber gave one of the kind of foundational kind of sociological diagnoses of this onset of instrumental rationality, taking over more traditional forms of rationality, and Weber catalogs them, right? So, for instance, there's kind of my favorite is what he calls ethical substantive rationality, and that's kind of from the pre-modern contexts, pre-modern times and places where people had commitments to particular values, and they structured everything else in their life around those values to quite what we might call irrational degrees, what the contemporary kind of modern scientific utilitarian attitude would have to call wasteful or irrational or incorrect or stupid degrees. That's the kind of ethical substantive rationality where everything in life gets wrapped around core value commitments. So what Weber calls ethical substantive rationality is kind of the main, I think, victim of the onslaught of instrumental rationality, or vulgarly we call it utilitarianism. Too many cars. I'm getting freaked out. I'm paranoid. All right, I'm just going to go somewhere else instead. All right. Fish Flow says I should do more IRL. Thanks. That's cool that you like it. It is fun, honestly. I do like it too. Let's see. David says it's going to be embarrassing for Justin when he realizes Jesus is king in all his modern philosophy. Damn, these disappear quickly. Yeah, I agree with that, more or less. I mean, to our modern ears, what does it mean to say Jesus is king? I mean, king is not even a word really in our lexicon. So, yeah. Anyway, I'm a little paranoid, probably because I ate some edibles before I set out to do this. So every time a car passes by, I'm like, so I'm just moving location. Oh, you're talking about Kanye? Yeah, I know that. I didn't listen to that. I can't keep up on that shit, but it's cool. All right, here we go. I got this. All right. Oh, this is kind of dope with the tree there. People will probably just think I'm a crazy homeless person. I feel safer this way. some crazy person. Some crazy person behind me. What did Elon Musk say? I didn't catch that. Oh yeah, Bataille, right. Yeah, this is the tree of life right next to me here. I gotta watch my back while I'm out here. You never know what kind of crazy people are gonna come at me. The thing that doesn't make me afraid of people in public is I'm in pretty good shape and I can run faster than pretty much anyone, for the most part. Because the people that would attack you in public tend to be kind of crazy people, not in terribly great shape. So no disrespect to them, I'm not judging them at all, but like if anyone tried to fuck with me, I just get up and run. They probably would not come anywhere near me unless they had a gun. And I think in Albuquerque a lot of people have guns, but whatever, I'm not worried. Yeah, I'll put the scar out on that's right, Rainier McBain. If I had to run, I would definitely keep the cigar. I'm not losing this shit. It was expensive. I ain't rich. Oh, yeah. All right. I was talking about Bataille. Right, so I'm going to write based Bataille. It's going to happen. This is going to be next up in my lineup. And I'm going to do a course with Nina Power. If you're new to the stream tonight, I announced that just a few minutes ago. I'm going to be doing my second online course on George Bataille with Nina Power, a philosopher who I really like her and admire her. So it's going to be awesome. And people were asking me about my perspective on Bataille, right? And what I was saying was I think he is primarily, my reading of Bataille, what is most interesting and valuable about Bataille is that he represents this kind of extraordinary critique of instrumental rationality, or what many people today just call utilitarianism for short. And AIC says the book club video on Bataille is the definitive take. Well, it won't be the definitive take for long, I assure you. Yeah, and Eggy is going to do the podcast in a couple weeks. I got a bunch of other cool people doing the podcast. I got a bunch lined up, actually. But anyway, I'll try to stay focused on Bataille. We'll make this live stream mostly about Bataille. So, unless I get any super chats, I'm going to just ignore the chat for a little bit and riff on Bataille. All right. One of Bataille's biggest arguments is this idea of what he calls general economy. And pretty much, to give you the quick and dirty explanation of what general economy is, pretty much Bataille thought that all systems, to some degree, could be explained with a kind of basic economic model. And he believed, and he tried to show in some of his nonfiction books, that systems in general have this weird property. Many weird properties, but there's one in particular that Bataille seizes on. And this is going to be his kind of main weapon in his onslaught against instrumental rationality. What he says is that there is a core paradox or contradiction in utilitarianism, which is that if everything is being selected and decided in order to promote some end, if everything is being decided to maximize for some criterion, or what we would call an end, if means are being selected for a particular end, to what end does that end serve? Why? Why do we select means for a certain end? In other words, there's this weird kind of logical regress, right? If everything is supposed to be done in subordination to certain ends, well, what is the utilitarian justification of that end? How do you select that end? And another way of understanding this is in a kind of more material way. And I think Bataille is, at the end of the day, a materialist. And what Bataille says is that when you look at systems ranging from the American economy to, the what are some other examples he gives? You could think of many examples, but this is the type of thing that I'll be doing research on and going over in greater detail moving forward. But stick with just the economy. But also he talks about war, for instance, would be another example. He says that when a system is optimizing and rationalizing, and you have this kind of utilitarian criteria that is operating and defining how a system is evolving over time, then what actually ends up happening is that there needs to be periodic expenditures. There needs to be periodic wasteful moments where the system kind of blows off steam, as it were. And I think that's actually a somewhat direct metaphor, right? Because that is essentially kind of the picture that he paints for us, is a system kind of building up pressure and then ultimately having to equilibrate itself by wasting, right? And so he talks about economics, he talks about military expenditures, and he gives some other examples also, explores different scenarios that might illustrate that type of phenomenon. And this, my friends, I think is the kind of underlying model that he wants to counterpose to a kind of instrumentally rational model. And for what it's worth, by the way, instrumental rationality and capitalism are more or less the same thing. He was a communist, George Bataille, and he's essentially presenting this kind of radical, I think, anti-capitalist philosophy or perspective, but in a very kind of post-Marxist way. I mean, he was a communist, so obviously in some ways he's a Marxist, but the guy was a total freak and weirdo, and was not some sort of like, dutiful party line activist. He was totally bonkers, and by the way, his lifestyle was not based at all. Okay, so that's, someone asked before, is Bataille based? In certain ways, yes, but very different than Deleuze. Okay, so he was a womanizer and cheated on his wife and did evil things like that. So we are not going to be complimenting or celebrating Bataille's rather evil personal lifestyle, to be perfectly frank. And I'll write a little bit about that in the book. I mean, me, I have no need for moralism or whatever, but I do want to observe fully kind of I want to paint an honest portrait of this character, just like I did with Base Deleuze. I want to give you a holistic and direct kind of portrait of his whole life, but also his ideas in a way that is honest. And I think the fact is that Bataille's life was demented and relatively twisted, and I don't think particularly successful. He was constantly drunk, constantly fucked up with gambling, wasting money. He's a pretty despicable man, to be honest, in his personal life anyway. Sorry, I gotta watch my back behind the tree of life here. So yeah, his personal life, not based like Deleuze, whose personal life was relatively based. But Bataille's mostly just insane and interesting. Really just super, super far out. And what I do think is based about Bataille is that he provides a kind of non-moralistic critique of capitalism. He's not saying, oh, corporations are bad, we should regulate corporations. Like, none of this kind of bullshit, He was like, capitalism is bad, so we should do crazy-ass shit, like seek the insane excesses of sexuality and a kind of base material reality. He loved the dirty, the filthy, and the most kind of excessive, ridiculous transgressions is what he was interested in as a way of, not directly, he didn't see it in a kind of directly activist light, like he was trying to overthrow capitalism by, like, cheating on his wife and doing, like, perverted sex shit. But he did kind of think that, as I was saying before, he has this larger critique of what he calls general economy. And he seems to basically think that if you can kind of if you can push systems beyond their limits, if you can transgress the limits of systems, it has a certain there's a certain peculiar principle which characterizes all systems, such that every system that's built on a kind of maximization or rationalization process, it produces its own paroxysms. It needs expenditure and waste, and he saw it kind of transgression and sin and all of his insane sexual perversions. He saw that as essentially representing this kind of expenditure, this what he called expenditure without reserve. And yeah, I think he did on some level. On some level, he did think that to pursue that kind of extraordinary, excessive lifestyle was, in some ways, a kind of base, materialistic, almost kind of mystical communism. That's essentially what Bataille was. He was kind of like a mystical communist, is what I might call him. Just bizarre. I mean, truly bizarre. I don't like. Kind of like with Base Deleuze, what I was saying in that book was that people in academia and all the kind of current, contemporary expert opinion on Deleuze has this like ridiculously childish kind of left-wing cartoon version of Deleuze that is really quite boring and false, actually. It's actually misleading. It doesn't even come close to really giving you a portrait that does him half of the justice he deserves. With Bataille, I think the popular imagination or the popular wisdom around Bataille, both for academics but also just educated people, I don't know that people really appreciate how fucking insane he was. And I don't just mean like, whoa, crazy man, he did fucked up perversion stuff. And the Acephali group, he tried to, he and Foucault and Roger Caillois were going to, sacrifice one of the members. Everyone knows that anecdote. I'll tell you more about that later. But these things he's known for, right? But I mean, he's just truly exceptional, truly singular. I mean, what type of person is a librarian by vocation? That's how they pay their bills. And then on the side, they write these like incredibly idiosyncratic books about Gnosticism and pornography and surrealism and Christianity and Marxism and all of these things. I mean, who does that in this kind of bizarre way? And so, yeah, I think he was much weirder than people realize, and I don't think we have a very good theory of like what he was all about, right? Like, where can you go to find in like 10,000 words, 15,000 words? Where can you go to just get a basic understanding of who Bataille was and how do his main ideas sync with his life, his own life, and the type of person that he was? Like, what does he really represent? What did he really leave behind as a contribution to the world? Light this bad boy back up, and that's going to be based Bataille. I'm going to give you a truly honest and based analysis of what Bataille was all about and how his main ideas connect to his life. So. Yeah, I gave you just a little bit of a preview with what I was saying. I basically just kind of gave you the main themes. Obviously, I have to do a lot of work to get my head back into those books. I have to review the books I've already read. I have to read some of the books I haven't. And I have to organize my ideas. But I pretty much just gave you all the main themes. Utilitarianism, his extraordinary critique of what he calls general economy. And yeah, I'm going to try to take a lot of stabs at contemporary utilitarianism, like effective altruism and rationalism as we know it today on the internet. Obviously, I mean that in a polite and respectful way. I'm somewhat adjacent to the rationalist spheres, so obviously I think there's a lot of smart people and they have a lot of really interesting ideas for sure. So I mean that in a playful way. But yeah, I want to really show how basically what Bataille shows is that utilitarianism just doesn't make sense. It doesn't work. And that we, as human beings, we need excesses. There's always these wasteful excesses that are integral to the systems that define our life and our society. And yeah, so I'm looking forward to getting my head back into a specific focused project. You can ask me some questions while I light this bitch up. I don't know too much about Shustov. Sorry, Elon Bust. No, I don't have any planted questions. Ooh, that's a good question. Any thoughts on Mark Fisher's work? Yeah, I was buddies with Mark Fisher. We weren't like super close friends, but we hung out a few times. I was in an organization with him for a year or two almost. So I knew him through that. We spent some time together over the course of some time as comrades in this organization that we were both members of, Plan C. But I did hang out with him a few times, one-on-one, in London. I think just two separate times, we had drinks. And yeah, he's a really, really cool dude, Mark Fisher. Yeah, it was the first time ever that someone who I considered a friend of mine at the time, who I admired and liked and enjoyed, died, let alone killed themselves. The first time ever happened. So he was cool, for sure. I actually have some personal stories about Mark. I just haven't really wanted to talk about him too much. As I said, I haven't had too many friends who have died, like people I was actually friends with at the time, like hanging out with at the time, who have died. And there's this kind of academic clique and kind of para-academic internet clique of Mark Fisher acolytes who, they like to talk about Mark Fisher, and that's fine. I'm not judging that at all, but I don't really feel comfortable, honestly, with it's too fresh. Like, I think he was, well, how do I put this? I think if you respect a thinker when they die, I won't even put it in terms of should, or, because I'm not passing judgment on anyone else, but me personally, I would feel uncomfortable writing about Mark this soon after his death, or speaking about Mark this soon after his death, just because sometimes I think you should let the dead rest a little bit longer, for me personally. I'll be honest also that this is hard to talk about because I'm not trying to beef with anyone on the internet, but let's just say that if I were to write and speak about my experiences with Mark, my observations on Mark and his work, if I were to do that, there would be a certain clique that would very hypocritically, I think, accuse me of, exploiting him or lying or whatever. There's a lot of anti-Justin hate out there. Like, seriously, folks, I don't know if you see this or know this, but there's a lot of resentment towards me, a lot of ill will for various reasons. I won't diagnose it. It's all good. I don't give a shit. It's all good. I think I'll just leave it at that. But my point is that there's a kind of Mark Fisher clique. And these people have no problem talking about him, building a brand on Mark Fisher, selling products related to Mark Fisher. And I don't judge them because I'm not the beefing type. And as I said, when a friend of mine dies, personally, my instincts are to let that sit for quite a long time. So that both applies to me saying anything about it, but also it applies to me criticizing others. I'm not going to beef with others about it. That would just be another way of, I think, desecrating the grave of, someone I liked and appreciated. So that's just me. So I'm genuinely not, calling anyone out or trying to beef. Although I am calling out that there are definitely some people out there who are comfortable, you know, doing certain things or saying certain things that if I were to say them or do them, they would go crazy talking shit about me. So that's neither here nor there. That's my quick 2 cents on why I don't talk about Mark or write about Mark. Probably will eventually. Well, here's the thing. Someone's saying in the chat that I should write more, talk more about Mark. Here's the thing. If you're going to talk about an intellectual who you genuinely respect, then you better fucking be honest. You better be really honest. And I really appreciated Mark. I really liked him as a friend. I really enjoyed hanging out with him. I truly respected him. I think he had a lot of good ideas. Very creative, fascinating dude. And politically also, I liked his politics. I liked how he thought about things. I mean, I was in an actual a political organization with him, so you get to see a different side of someone when you do that kind of stuff. And so I have many, many good things to say about Mark, but you've heard most of those, right? He's adored, right? Generally, nowadays anyway. After his death, he's very celebrated, so I'm sure you've heard many times all the cool things about Mark, and I'm sure you have your own awareness of them. And of course, I could tell you some cool stories and some observations that reflect that. But true intellectuals deserve something a little bit more sophisticated than just celebration and unadulterated praise. And if I'm going to write about any intellectual I admire, whether that be Mark Fisher or anyone else, as a show of love to that person and respect to that person, I'm going to try to dig in as deeply and insightfully as I can into that person's errors and that person's mistakes and where I think that person might have gone wrong, either in their ideas or even in their life. And I do have some thoughts about that when it comes to mental illness and politics and activism and how intellectuals organize their priorities and how ideas relate to well-being. Oh, okay. Thanks for the super chat there. I really appreciate that. Spiced. I think that's Spiced Demiurge. Spiced is acknowledging my comment before that. I get a lot of hate on the internet. I honestly, I get a particularly, I think, exceptional quantity of hatred, given my kind of niche where, from like, I get hatred from academics. I get hatred from even like weird theory people on Twitter. That's just, it's never made sense to me. People love to hate on me, but do I look like I care? Does this look like a man who cares? I'm sitting under the fucking tree of knowledge right here, smoking my cigar in a lovely spring evening in the desert of New Mexico. And I'm a happy camper because I'm a free man. And I get to think about anything and write about anything. And if I have 10,000 people who hate me, but I have fucking 75 people right here who will, who are interested and will just listen, then I consider myself already extremely successful. I mean, compare that to what Nietzsche had in his lifetime. Compare that to the quote unquote success or results that Van Gogh had in his lifetime. If that's your comparison, I'm on top of the world, man. I don't care if I have haters. In any event, people were asking me about Mark Fisher, and I was just saying that if I'm going to write about someone who I knew and respected and enjoyed and admired, I'm going to be honest. I'm going to be really honest. And if you're going to be honest about someone who's dead, then you really need to wait a long time or a reasonable amount of time. And yeah, so when the time is right, I will probably write something long and serious about how I view the work of Mark Fisher and how I view his life, and it will be honest, and it will be an act of love and respect and appreciation. Because the fact is, you're not really treating someone with respect unless you're willing to really act like an adult and really zero in objectively on everything, and faults and shortcomings and mistakes and errors as well. So, see, ultimately, folks, this is the problem with writing about someone so soon after their death. The people who are writing about Mark Fisher now, the problem is that because his death was so recent, it would be crazy and terrible. You'd be a bad person if you were to really focus on possibly some of his major mistakes, either in his life or in his ideas. That would just be rude, right? It would be cruel. You would actually be unreasonably distasteful and cruel, nasty person if you were to write too honestly about the life of someone who just died. And so what does it mean to write an essay about Mark Fisher today, this soon? I wouldn't really be able to do it correctly, to do it honestly, to do it fully, personally. I'm honestly not beefing with anyone. I'm just saying that's how I see it. I'll tell you a good story, like a minor anecdote. So yeah, Mark and I were both members of this organization called Plan C, and there was this time. This is at that time when this is around 2015 or 16, yeah, around that time, and so political correctness is definitely already a thing, but it's not quite like what it was in, let's say, the high points of 2016 and 17. So it's still a relatively niche problem, mostly in activist circles. But as many of you know, Mark Fisher wrote this famous essay about the vampire's castle, where he basically tried to diagnose the political correctness woke problem, like, quite early. And he got tons of hatred. It was this horrible, horrible thing for him, because he was very embedded in the left sociologically. Most of his friends were in the left. It's kind of very much how his social circles were structured. And so, you know, if you get a serious campaign of kind of woke activists on your case in like 2015, 2016, and you were an active, invested member of the left, dude, you fucking scared me with that shit, alter ego. I seriously get fucking spooked, man. It's because I ate some edibles before, so I'm like, yeah, honestly, don't do that. I'm not going to be able to finish the stream. Yeah, so I'm trying to just paint a picture for you that at the time of the Vampire's Castle essay, which was much earlier even, but then all the way up to, like, let's say 2015, 2016, shit was like more intense than ever. I think it was like, especially if you were sociologically embedded in the left, because if you were accused of racism or something like that, it could mean that basically you lose all your friends, like, in a day, okay? So that is the context, right? And I think Mark had a rather traumatic experience with the Vampire's Castle essay. He seriously took so much shit for it. And that was before I knew him, by the way. I had not met him yet at that point. But I read the essay and I watched the insane backlash. In any event, when we were both members of Plan C, there was this forum that we would use to do most of the group communication. And I wrote an essay for the website at one point where I was, basically just just one of those kind of like radical left-wing activist essays, one of those theory essays where it's, kind of like a manifesto, kind of like a diagnosis of, the political moment and all of that. And it's fine. It's cool. Maybe I'll dig it up one day and share it with you or whatever. But I remember, this is the funny story I wanted to share with you. I remember when I posted it to the forum, Mark was like really worried about me posting it. I remember him saying something to the effect of like, dude, I don't know if you should publish that. I'm worried about you. Like that, this might, he said he really liked it for what it's worth. Because it was very much, he and I had very similar kind of left libertarian politics in that regard. I think he was much more of a kind of, he was much more into the state and kind of more trad socialism than I was, but definitely a very kind of culturally libertarian ethos Mark Fisher had. And so we had that kind of shared commitment to free speech really, and cultural kind of libertarianism in a way. So he liked the essay. I remember he affirmed it and encouraged it, but at the same time, he was really worried. And at the time I was like, no, dude, I don't think, like, I think you're overestimating I don't think anything bad will happen. I'm not worried. And I just remember it was just funny because it was cool of him because he was looking out for me, and he was trying to, I think, prevent what happened to him from happening to me. But on the other hand, to me, I kind of interpret it as like, it just kind of showed, I think, how sensitive he was to that because of his rather traumatic experience with the Vampire's Castle. And, I took his advice. I took it to heart. I thought like, oh, maybe he's right. Like, maybe I shouldn't. I don't know. But I was like, no, I really don't think, what are they going to do to me? It could also just be that we're different temperamentally, and I've maybe just a little bit more of a personality trait that makes me like not so worried about that, maybe. I don't know what it was exactly. It's just a funny little anecdote because, I decided I would just publish it or whatever. And, what I always tell people is people are always paranoid and worried about, if I write this essay, am I going to get canceled? Am I going to get, a witch hunt mob after me? And I always say, like, if that happens, that's a pretty good result, honestly, because at least people are paying attention, and at least, your ideas are having an impact on the world in one way or another. The worst thing that can happen from writing anything is always just a lack of response, right? It's if nothing happens. That's the greatest form of failure. That's the saddest, ultimately, most cruel judgment on you possible. And it's not that bad, right? Because being ignored, nobody reading something, or no one commenting on something, it's no punishment. That's not fun. That's fine. That's easy to withstand. Who cares? That's the worst that can happen. And that was pretty much what happened with this essay. I wasn't canceled. There was no mob at my front door, as Mark was worried. But just it didn't really have any effect anyway at all.